Sounds good. Well, good evening and welcome to our Tuesday, December 6th school committee meeting. Welcome to our guests. I would remind everyone, if you would like to speak tonight, we do have a sign-in sheet. If you could sign in, I'll grab that in a little bit. We are going to adjust the agenda a little bit, so we'll give you an opportunity to share once things have been presented. So thank you for joining us. If you would all rise, we're going to say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Adjustments to the agenda, yes.
We're just going to move the stuff in my report around so that we can do the vocational opportunities first when we get to my report as opposed to last.
Communications.
In your packet, you have a communication from the planning board at Town Hall in regards to the master plan committee, I believe. Natalie, is it in here? Yeah, I think so. Well, it isn't in here. They are looking for a school committee representative to sit on the master planning committee. For those of you that have been here for a while, there has been several master planning committees at the town level. I think you have somebody designated as the government study liaison.
I think it was Mike. Oh, it's you.
Was it Mike or David? So I don't know, that used to be the name of this committee, so I don't know if you just want to have David be the liaison, or if you want
I'm
to.
happy to do it.
Okay, perfect.
Somebody else wanted
You're
to.
comfortable to do that?
And if nobody wants to do it, I'm happy to do it as your representative, but they did ask for.
Yeah, no, and I don't mind, or anyone else.
I don't mind
be
either, if anybody
alternative.
else,
Yeah.
I can be a backup.
Okay, so I'll do David and Sue.
Can we just give them my Martinetti address though?
Absolutely.
I used to send it to an old
Yep.
address. Okay, that's what I do.
Absolutely.
Bill's
They will be
schedule has been
excited.
approved. So with that, I'll take consideration for approval of the school committee meeting minutes of November 15th, 2022.
So moved.
We have a
Second.
motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. Now, I know obviously we've talked a little bit about the school committee vacancy, but we can do it in a sort of a more formal way here now. I think obviously we know with busy schedules and whatnot, it's important that we add that fifth member, I think, to our committee to help balance the load and have community involvement there. So I'm going to talk with a few, but if that seems to be the consensus, we can start that process.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, I'm not comfortable leaving the vacant.
Yeah. So I wasn't, obviously,
Yeah, you weren't part of it
I
last
was
time.
on the other side of that ladder.
So I'll reach out to Sabrina to start the process, just so you're aware. They have to post that there's a vacancy. It has to stay posted, I think, for 14 or 15 days, at which point then you would have a joint meeting with the select board and the school committee to interview potential candidates. You would deliberate it and potentially make a decision in that meeting, or, depending upon how many candidates you're interviewing, it may take multiple meetings.
Candidates go through Sabrina, not you guys.
They don't come through us, no, they go through town hall. But the timeline is probably late January, early February, by the time you'd be putting somebody in the seat, just logistics of calendars and getting
But
meetings.
that at least gets them in place before budget season. That's
Correct. So I will reach out to Sabrina in the morning and start that process. Perfect.
Sounds good. We'll welcome another member to join us.
Yeah.
With that, we head into the superintendent's report.
Sure. So at the request of a member of the community, we have added an update on vocational opportunities for students to the agenda for tonight. Again, that wasn't necessarily the main focus for tonight, but it came up, so we want to address that. I know that's why many people are here, so we are moving that to the start of my report, as opposed to boring you with School Budgeting 101 and the 13 overnight travel requests that are also part of the packet. So we came to you in, let's see if it works. Is it going to work? Yep. We came to you in June, on June 7th, and gave an update of kind of where we were, what we were looking at and exploring. So tonight, I'm just going to reiterate some of the information that we shared in June, because I know not many people were here or had a chance to view that meeting, talking a little bit about historical enrollment, some of the previous timelines for our vocational enrollment opportunities, and then updating what we had identified as next steps at that June meeting to where we are now. And for fun, I'm going to give you some more new next steps. So just looking historically at what our vocational enrollment has been here in Pembroke, you can see it has fluctuated numbers of students enrolled over the course of the past 12 years or so. Our percentage of our student enrollment is over there on the left. So we've been hovering around 2.5% for the past several years. You can see with the number of students enrolled at each of those opportunities that there has been some fluctuation in the enrollment and admission processes in those buildings. So again, Norfolk Aggie, we've had more students successfully apply there in the past couple of years. You'll see our enrollment there this year is 17 students spanning grades 9 through 12. That's the largest number we've had there. Bristol Aggie, we did have one student enroll there a few years back. That was a family decision. The student's mother worked in that community, and so it was a good fit for them. I have received several applications for Bristol Aggie for our current class of 8th graders as well, so that's great to see another agricultural opportunity for students that isn't too far from home.
I was going to say, where is that located?
Bristol, Plymouth. So it's a bit of a bus ride, but I think it's actually a little bit shorter than the ride to Norfolk Aggie. Silver Lake, you can see our numbers have fluctuated there from the mid-20s to the mid-30s. We currently have 34 students enrolled there now in grades 10 through 12. We do not have any freshmen enrolled at Silver Lake this current school year. Back in 2015-16, we had a conversation at the school committee level of designating Silver Lake. That's when we started the conversation of designating Silver Lake as the vocational school of preference. What that does is gives you all as a committee some financial stability when budgeting out for future year enrollment. So what we had seen is that the enrollment at South Shore Tech had fluctuated pretty wildly for a period of time there, right? So we went from 4 kids one year to 45 kids at one point. The price point at South Shore Tech is a little over $20,000, so that's a big budget unknown when we're going into the process. So designating Silver Lake as the school of preference meant that any student that was interested in applying to vocational schools had to apply to Silver Lake in addition to any other school they were looking for. So allowed to apply to South Shore Tech, any of the Aggies, any other opportunities that are out there. If they were accepted into South Shore Tech, to Silver Lake, the expectation was that they would attend Silver Lake. If they were interested in a vocation that wasn't offered at Silver Lake, I met individually with each family to talk about what the right place for their kid to be is, right? So the underlying philosophy in this entire process is we want kids to be where they have identified that they're going to be successful. We don't want kids to be in a place where they don't want to be, right? That makes learning hard, and I think, developmentally, 14, 15, 16-year-olds, it's hard to begin with. So really trying to make decisions that are in the best interest of the district, but also in the best interest of families. So you can see our numbers have fluctuated a bit between South Shore Tech and Silver Lake, but South Shore Tech stopped taking a number of our kids a couple of years ago. So this is our historical incoming 9th grade acceptances. So again, we have 4 students at Norfolk Aggie this year. You'll see South Shore Tech has not taken any of our students since the 2019-2020 school year. A function of that is their member town enrollment is up, interest in vocational education is high, so there has been no acceptance for students from Pembroke to South Shore Tech since 2019-2020.
Aaron, just real quick. So if we look at, say we had 80 in 21-22, do we know how many total applied that particular year?
So the percentage of our students that applies is a little bit higher, right? So like last year, 42 students applied for vocational opportunities. That number is usually anywhere from 30 to 40, 45, depending on the size of the class. But you can see historically, we've sent usually anywhere from 16 to 20 students to vocational education. So about 50% of the students that voice an interest end up making it successfully through the admission process. So just wanting to go to a vocational school, there is admission criteria and entrance requirements that students do need to meet in order to meet the minimum requirement for enrollment in those schools.
So we were at that number this year, we'd have roughly 20-ish or so would have probably gotten in, roughly.
In the conversation that I had with Elliot, just because Silver Lake was our only option this year, I think he thought he saw about 16 to 18 students that in the past would have been our minimum criteria. So, and those can overlap with our Aggie kids as well. Generally, kids that apply to Norfolk Aggie apply to our vocational schools as well, just to have all their options out there. So here's a little bit about what we've done in the past few years. So back in 2012, we did have a conversation with South Shore Tech about becoming a member town. At that time, the cost to buy in was about $500K, so $500,000 in a capital investment. So because it's already an existing running school that the member towns have paid into, there's some sort of value associated with joining them. In 2012, that allocation was $500,000. There is no tuition break for students, whether you're a member or a non-member town. So the tuition, let's say, I think this year it's $18,992. It's the same. It doesn't matter if you're a member town or a not member town.
So it's the buy-in plus per pupil
Absolutely.
cost?
Per
okay.
pupil cost, which includes tuition, any special education services a student receives, as well as transportation. So back in 2012, there wasn't a huge number of our students on a wait list anywhere to go to vocational school. At the time, I was not the superintendent here, but the decision from the committee was not to move forward with the buy-in to South Shore VOTEC. In 2018, we shifted to we started the conversations regarding school of preference and shifting applicants towards Silver Lake. Again, Silver Lake was under-enrolled. Our students enrolling there provides us with financial stability, as well as Silver Lake with financial stability. In 2021, we started talking about our students that don't fit into either of those started planning for coursework for our students that don't fit into either of those populations, a traditional high school experience or a vocational experience, and talking about, is there some sort of hybrid offering we can create at Pembroke High School that has some sort of hands-on component to it if possible, but not a substitute for a Chapter 74 vocational program. So I know when I went to high school, I took home ec, I took mechanical drawing, I took an elective in woodworking and made a doorstop, and it was excellent. So just, those traditional experiences seem to be coming back around again. We ran a home ec class at our middle school for several years that was so highly enrolled that we're looking at what could we put at the high school to give students more of a break in their day and an opportunity to work with their hands. In 2022, the Chapter 74 enrollment rules changed. And so this is a good point I know there's a lot of parents in the audience, this is a good point just to pause and say, it's important to engage with your state representatives about changes such as the change in the Chapter 74 enrollment policy. So the catalyst for the change in the policy is because of primarily because students from Boston Public Schools were enrolling in vocational schools on the 128 belt. So the administrators at Boston Public Schools didn't want to pay the per pupil cost to send their students out to those schools, so they lobbied lawmakers to make a change to the Chapter 74 enrollment policy, which now prohibits every regional district from taking students out from outside their district unless they've taken everyone internally that has applied and met the minimum criteria. So, in my conversations with the folks at Upper Cape Cod Tech, with South Shore VOTEC, with Silver Lake, there is some push to have us reach out to representatives and talk about the fact that this change that you've made for one urban school district has had a ripple effect in South Shore towns like us, like Duxbury. There are a handful of towns right around here that are floating out there with no guaranteed option for their students to attend vocational education. So again, not necessarily going to solve the problem, but definitely a step that folks can take if they're interested in advocacy. So in 2023, again, we are proposing to continue to build out those pathway programs, and you'll see as we go through the rest of the presentation, talking a little bit about what else can we do. There is not an answer right now, and I think that's the hardest part about this conversation. There is not one answer. There actually is 10 options. There's 10 ways this could go in the next 5 to 10 years, but there is no immediate answer right now. Because we don't have it, so it would take, if we wanted to buy into South Shore VOTEC, it would take 5 school years. If we wanted to build a vocational school here, it would take more than that. If we wanted to start just one Chapter 74 program at our high school, it would be a 3-year process. So there's no answer that is immediate. Everything is a multi-year process. That's not an option anymore, and I'll get to that in a minute. Yep, sure. So in the past, we've talked about what if we started 1 or 2 Chapter 74 strands at our high school. Obviously, there are some that are less expensive to run than others, but looking at what our students are electing, both at Silver Lake and at South Shore VOTEC, so we currently have 11 students at South Shore VOTEC, 6 seniors and 5 juniors. We have 1 student in allied health, 1 in automotive, 1 in computer tech, 2 in electrical, 4 in medical fabrication. So there's not a critical mass of students in any one vocation. But looking at that list, is there anything that we could even attempt to tackle? Early education is one of the easier ones to do. Again, still takes some capital investment, still takes some staff, but we do have a in-district preschool that we could use as part of that. So as I get further into it, we'll talk a little bit about, looking at that and exploring that as a Chapter 74 pathway. But again, our capacity as a high school in its current form, it's not built to be a Chapter 74 school. So looking at what we could offer, we would have to offer those that are really more heavy on the human capital end as opposed to the, building capital and maintenance end. Again, as I was just saying, it is a multi-year process to even begin to become a Chapter 74 school. These are all links. When we post the presentation on the website, you can click on what each of the criteria you need to do everything is. Again, ton of work, but definitely worth it if at the end, we're able to capture 5 or 6 students in a strand at the high school and have them be in a place where they identify as being successful, if that's the direction that we choose to move in. We had a lot of conversation back in June about the Hatch building. I took several of you on a tour there, and we've all survived. Since then, we did ask at Springtown meeting for CPC funding for an engineer to come in and take a look at the Hatch building to see if that is a place where we could retrofit and renovate to create a Chapter 74 space in town, understanding that it's not really, Pembroke High School isn't really in a place where, opening up the building envelope, updating HVAC and electrical for the building is something that would be within our operating budget. So taking a look at the Hatch building, seeing what was there, obviously as a historical building, the Hatch building is also eligible for CPC funds, so that's an opportunity to offset some of the costs. We took several tours of the building. I toured the building with the Board of Health and our town manager. The decision was made that there's not a viable option at the Hatch building in its current form. So the next steps for us for the Hatch building are to reach out to any living heirs and ask permission to demolish the building. At that point, you as a committee could decide if you wanted to build something there or if you wanted to create more open space. We talked a little bit about potentially a playground associated with the community center. Again, we've started the process to retain an attorney to reach out to find any living heirs of Roger Hatch to see what we can do there. But it was a fun tour. Oh, yeah. Silver Lake, when we talked in June, we talked about approaching Silver Lake about purchasing a guaranteed bank of seats. So we talked about approaching Silver Lake and offering to purchase 10 seats every year in Silver Lake's 9th grade class, regardless of the number of students that we had interested in those seats. So, in a year where there's a heavy interest in vocational, obviously we would use those 10 seats. In a year where only 2 kids want to go, we'd still pay for the 10 seats. So after a lot of conversation with Jill, the superintendent over there, and Elliot Glass, the director of CTE, they got a legal opinion both from the Department of Elementary Secondary Education and their legal counsel about letting us purchase a bank of seats, really, in effect, becoming a member of Silver Lake without truly calling it that. And they were advised not to do that. So their attorney felt that down the road, if there was a number of students that were looking for vocational opportunities in their member towns and were unable to garner those because of the 10 seats given to Pembroke, that would in turn be a denial of FAPE, so a free and appropriate public education for those students. In conversations with Elliot, obviously, everybody sees the trends associated with vocational enrollment, and Silver Lake is looking to expand their offerings in the next 2 to 3 years, which could open up more seats. So they have physical capacity in their building. There's space there for more kids. There just isn't established programs right now, so they are looking to expand those offerings over the next 2 to 3 years, which could in turn translate into more seats being available for us to join. South Shore VOTEC. Font's really small when it's far away. So South Shore VOTEC, as I said, when we talked to them in 2012, it was an initial capital buy-in. That was the only thing on the table at the time to join. It has since changed because South Shore VOTEC is in the process of the MSBA building project. So they are looking to create or build a new school building through the MSBA process, which gives districts about a 50% reimbursement. So a $250 million building project would cost the member towns a little over $100 million. So it is a really great deal when it comes to building. But looking at what it costs for our students to go to South Shore VOTEC now, you can see at the top of the page our current cost for students to go to South Shore VOTEC is almost $18,000 a student, plus any sped services, plus any transportation. If we were to attempt to buy in right now, and I use the words right now loosely because buying in right now is still a 3-year process. What we would need to do is make a capital investment, so it's a $900,000 annual investment. Pembroke would pay their proportional share based on enrollment. You can spread that out over 10 years. So that isn't something that would necessarily need a debt exclusion override for. It's something we could.
So it's just a one-time buy.
It's a one-time payment that you can spread out over 10 years.
For some reason I had in my head it was every year, so that's good.
No.
Okay.
It will continue to grow, obviously, with a new building project on the horizon. There wouldn't be a need for new capital. But as that building opens and,
Overhead.
Right. So in addition to the capital purchase, the payment, they have an existing stabilization fund, so Pembroke's share of that would be $400,000. You could, again, pay that over 10 years. So that would be a $40,000 a year payment to pay into their stabilization fund that's already established with their 8-member towns. The tuition, the sped increment, and the transportation. You would then need 6/8 of the member towns, so at town meeting, 6 of the 8 current member towns would have to vote in favor of us joining.
The towns themselves or the committees?
The towns themselves, so it's a town meeting vote. So currently, it's about $25,000 for our kids to go there with the tuition and the transportation and whatnot. The capital investment in the payments into the stabilization account would add about $4,000 per student, assuming we were able to get 20 kids. And again, the enrollment is based off your proportional share of your 8th graders. So not knowing if Marshfield will end up getting accepted at the end, not knowing kind of those pieces of it, estimating 20 students are able to go. That would increase the per student cost by about $4,000. So you're talking about $30,000 per student to send them there. And on top of that, so because they are in a building project cycle, so they're in the feasibility stage now, every member town would need to be part of the debt exclusion override for the new building. So that would require potentially a $9 to $10 million debt exclusion override for us here in Pembroke in order to pay for our portion of the building cost associated with the new building.
So a debt exclusion of how much?
Of 9 to,
Nine
so
to
the
10
building is still in the drawing phase, right?
Okay.
There's no decisions made.
So $9 to $10 million for the building plus the $900,000.
It's plus everything, right? So
Plus
the building
the
project adds about
400.
another $10,000 on per student. So when the building opens in 2025, which would be the earliest we'd be able to send students there, even if we started the process today to join, would be September of 2025. The per pupil cost would be upwards of $41,000 per student.
And so then one follow-up question, is there a cap on the number of students?
Right. There absolutely is. So the current enrollment at South Shore VOTEC is capped at 650 students. To take on another member town, that means that every town that exists in there now will have fewer seats available. Part of the conversation that I had with South Shore VOTEC was just, feeling them out. See, I don't even know where it will land with Marshfield, because I do know that there is a huge interest in the 8-member towns now for vocational seats. So it's possible they may not get their 6-8 votes for that. I talked a little bit about with Tom Hickey, the superintendent at South Shore VOTEC, about is there even an appetite to add a 10th town at this time? His feeling was
Marshfield would make 9.
Marshfield would make 9. His feeling is that those committees wouldn't be interested in looking at that until the new building was opening, right? Because there's potential in the new building for the enrollment to go up to 850 as opposed to the current 650 students. But again, like a town like Hanover. So Hanover, their proportional share of the enrollment
Yeah, well,
right now is 103 seats. If we were to join, their seats would go down to 85. So that's a big number.
And so if I'm understanding correctly, then for us to get into the mix of this after Marshfield does it, we'd have to get then 7 out of
Seven out of 9
nine.
would have to vote in favor of us joining.
To basically vote to approve us to give up some of what they just fought to get.
Correct.
Oh, the deck is a little stacked in a
Right.
bad direction.
But it doesn't
is what I'm
mean in
hearing.
2025, when they're entertaining the option to include new members, that the demand for vocational seats will still be high. You saw from the slide before, it does ebb and flow over time. I don't know where we'll be in the 25-26 school year. I do think there'll still obviously be a need for our students, but I don't know if the other member towns will be looking to exceed their enrollments, right? So right now, there's, I think, a 50-person wait list in Hanover for their seats. Our students, we're talking about potentially getting 9 seats that first year. So 42 kids this year were interested in applying. Potentially 9 of them would have gotten in if we were a member district.
Do we
and
have,
potentially less if we wait and it'll potentially be less. So, because if there's 10 towns.
Right, it's a smaller share.
It's a much smaller
Well,
share.
is the share equal? So say
It's
10,
not.
10 out of the 650 would we get 65 students?
No, so
or
it's based off your current eighth grade enrollment. So of the member towns, there's only a couple of them that are larger than us in Pembroke. So Abington's at 178, Whitman and Hanson are 287, Rockland's 190, Situate's 203, Pembroke is 206 this year for eighth grade. So we would have a pretty solid proportional share of the enrollment, but it isn't, you know, a 10, the 10, the 10, the 10. It doesn't work like that.
Would it be too early to ask what the potential increase to a Pembroke taxpayer would be?
Right, so
I mean, I know it's a rough estimate, but.
right, if you, so just the community center project, I think the vote went back out for 1.3 million.
Right.
And that was $22 on the average household, so you're talking about 9 or 10 times that, so $150 to $180.
And that's
on
with
the
the
averages.
lower interest rate. The interest rates are a
Right,
lot higher now.
and I don't know what the final cost of the building project will be.
Yeah.
You know, again, they're still in the process of getting an owner project manager, which is the first step, so.
Yeah.
and how does that calculation work again? It's a particular dollar amount per $100,000 value of your assessed value on the home.
Of your home, right, yes.
And are we in a process where the town may come out and reassess property values? Because then it's kind of a hidden
I think they
additional
just did
tax
that for fiscal year 2023 here in
Did they?
Pembroke. I
I
think they
wasn't sure
just
when
did
the
an assessment.
reassessment was, so, because you know, it's almost like we're calculating out something and then there should be another hit, and I don't want to see that happen to me. Second question, kind of a follow-up to it, but do we have any data on the increase in interest in vocational schools throughout these current member districts? Did we see a pop, especially because of COVID, and the changes in the educational models that we had to use during that time? And could that be inflating numbers that might go down and stay down, which might help us long-term if we do?
So I think there's definitely been an increase this past year at Silver Lake, which is the reason why there's no available seats for us. But if you look at South Shore Tech, they haven't been taking our students for a number of years, which shows that the interest in their member towns has been higher than the seats that they have to offer to those member towns. So there isn't, you know, necessarily a quick answer for what the trend looks like, but I do think that just in the statewide and nationally, there's an increased interest in vocational education, rightfully so, right? We saw during the pandemic what professions were needed the most, and vocations are one of those.
Well, in terms of this, it seems to me like if we're going to spend, you know, what, $15 million at the end on another town's vocational program, it would make more sense to do it here if we're going to spend the money.
Right, so it's not I don't want you to think about it as another town's vocational program. So South Shore VoTech is in itself a regional school district.
Except
So-
that we'd be capped at, like, the lowest number of students per year being.
Well, it's based off your proportional share. So again, our enrollment is greater than Cohasset, greater than Norwell, greater than a couple of the others. So
Yeah,
we'd
yeah.
have more seats than they have. And districts like Cohasset traditionally send, I think right now they have 15 seats. They send 3, which means their other 12 seats go back out to the other members for redisbursement in the formula. So, you know, I don't think Norwell or Cohasset has necessarily seen a surge in interest in vocational schools that, even with a new building, that they'd be filling all of their proportional seats. But it is in itself a region. So you're not paying for a Hanover school, or you're not paying for an Abington school. You are a piece of that union, and it is as much yours as it belongs to another district. So you're paying into your own thing. I don't want you to think you're like building up the property value in Hanover, because that's where the VoTech is located.
Maybe my train of thought was going a little bit your way was, all right, tech programs or the ability to provide the services and the cost of doing that isn't necessarily really taken on by any district, shy of maybe a Plymouth that can do it, right? Because there's huge
Or a
cost.
Weymouth, right.
Or a Weymouth. There's huge
Taunton.
cost involved to be able to pull that off. What about potentially partnering with Duxbury and Marshfield
Right.
and creating our own, right? Or if we're going to invest
Thinking the same
15
thing,
million
yeah.
a year, is there appetite for that? If Marshfield doesn't get in and Duxbury's looking and maybe some other communities in our region are looking,
And then does that make the Hatch property more appealing? Because are we in a position where, if that happens, and we could partner with them, and we do find an error, we get permission to take the Hatch building down and build, which is a lot less than
I don't think
15
that- I don't
million.
think
Right, that, the
That-
footprint of
that-
that building is not
footprint
built.
isn't gonna get you
It's not
No.
going to get you where you need, because
No.
it's like, then we haven't, I hate to say it, but an income potential to offset
Right, no,
that.
so I think
but I don't think
Marshfield
the
will
footprint's
be successful. I mean, their regional committee is meeting tonight to talk about the
When
same
did they,
thing.
when did they start this?
They started in May of 2022, so they started at their spring town meeting, and the vote at their town meeting was to create a regional committee to engage in a conversation with South Shore Tech about joining. So they have spent the summer meeting discussing what the financial obligations to Marshfield would be to join, talking about, the enrollment pieces. So now they are presenting to the Marshfield School Committee tonight to talk about kind of the next steps, what they forecast the costs to be, so that they can place it on their spring town meeting in 2023 to vote to be a member. Once that's approved, it needs to be placed on the other 8 town meeting agendas. Again, depending on the timing of when your town meeting is. Our vote to get in could happen after Whitman already had their town meeting, so you'd have to wait for another cycle. Let's say 6 out of 8 towns say yes, then the Commissioner of Education has 1 calendar year to approve the entry into the regional agreement, which is why even with Marshfield, it's 2025 before kids are going to be able to go there. So it's a 3-year process, and again, because they are embarking on a building process, and they have been selected for the feasibility phase since Marshfield voiced an interest in joining,
They don't
I
have an
didn't
appetite.
get the feeling from the superintendent there that the member towns are looking to make the formula more complex at this time, but would be interested potentially in 2025 when the new building would be opening. They would have a better idea of the capacity and the opportunity to keep folks kind of status quo as well as add a new member. So just for point of reference, again, what we spend per student to educate a student in district right now is a little over $15,600. So we're talking about a $41,000 price point to send a student to South Shore Tech with the new building project compared to what we're paying to educate a student in district.
And that $15,000 and change per student is dependent on our Chapter 70 funding. And I think it's important to note that, at least in the last couple of years, the increases to that have been flat, so.
It's anywhere from 1% to 2%. Yeah, it's not a huge increase. So understanding that there are not, really quick solutions to this, what we have been working through, and we've talked about at the committee level for the past 4 years, and this is the first year we've been able to start the actual programs, is the pathway programs at the high school. Again, not in exchange for a full vocational education for students, but a pathway for students to get to some career training, some internships, some really job-specific coursework associated with some fields of interest. So this year we have, as you know, 3 pathways: digital arts, business, and computer science. We met this morning at EdSub to talk about some proposed new programs for next year. We have talked already at this level about expanding the Pathways program next year to include integrating computer integration manufacturing and biomedical as our pathways for next year. Again, there is a CAD/CAM hands-on piece associated with the computer integrated manufacturing, which is great. Biomedical is one of when we surveyed students, I think 33% of students had an interest in some sort of coursework or exposure to that career field. So we are optimistic that students will self-select to get into those pipelines at the high school. In addition to that, having started the computer science pathway this year and getting feedback from students and taking a look at the program and talking with our partners in the business sector about, what are you looking for students to be able to do when they come to you to work? Granted, a lot of our students go on to college, but some don't. If you were going to hire a high school graduate, what would you like them to have? And as we're looking at the computer science, there's a computer tech and repair piece to it that folks are looking for too. They want students to be able to build and take apart the devices that folks are using. So we are proposing a course next year that is a student help desk that allows students some ability to do that as an elective. As I said before, we are looking at expanding the pathways in the school year 24-25 to include early childhood. That's parallel to any Chapter 74 vocational program. So if we were going to go down that path and offer one strand at the high school and it's early education, happy to do that. But in the interim, we are exploring what it would look like to have it as a pathway for students, to look at some developmental psych classes, to partner with the preschool, and have students have some training and internships.
Erin, recognizing some of the obstacles, and as we're looking at these different pathways, and forgive me if I can't recall, but have we had any conversations with other schools for partnerships to not offer the same type of pathways they may be looking at, and then kind of a secondary part of that, have we looked at any opportunities? I'm a plumber's daughter, so I know there are apprenticeships and things like that. I don't know what the age was, because my dad didn't want me to be a plumber. Kind of wish I was during COVID, because my brother was really busy. But do we have that opportunity to send any of our students into an apprenticeship with electricians, plumbers, heating?
Right,
air
so that's some of the
conditioning?
work that Mary Ellen Gates, our Pathways Coordinator, is doing now, right? So we understand that the Pathways program as proposed and in our program of studies definitely attracts some students, but it doesn't fit for everybody, right? So we have some students that are interested in landscape design. None of these pathways are necessarily for them, but can we make a connection in the community with a business that is willing to take on a student as an intern? We can give them course credit for that. The internship can happen outside of school hours. It can happen on vacations. It can happen over the summer. They can even get paid for it in most instances. So really trying to make those connections to create some hands-on experience for students that has some sort of school graduation component to it. That's what we're working on now. We also are, there's a couple other. So again, building out the biomedical and engineering, looking at early childhood, looking at the hands-on opportunities with the IT help desk repair, looking at what it would look like to join another region. So I reached out to Cape Cod Upper Tech at the suggestion of Lance, and they were intrigued by my question. They had never thought about it. They currently have 5 member towns: Bourne, Falmouth, Marion, Sandwich, and Wareham. They're an established vocational school that is not on the horizon for a building project. So I did make a connection with them today, and they were going to, Roger was going to go back to their members and see if there's any appetite to even talk about what it would take for somebody to join. So that's a potential lead. I also had the 18th conversation with Tom Hickey today at South Shore Tech, and we talked a little bit about what else can we do so kids can at least get the experience, right? So it's not a chapter 74 education, but it's hands-on shop experience. So we talked about potentially partnering with South Shore Tech to use their shops after school. So again, he would need his staff to be willing to work additional hours. We would obviously need to pay for that and to rent the space, but is there a shop or two that we could rent for 100 hours over the course of the school year where kids could get 100 hours of training in that shop? That's definitely, something worth looking at for families. And again, as I said before, really engaging with the state reps about what the change in that policy means for districts like us, because I do think it was an unintended consequence. I don't think I think that the consensus was they were solving a large problem, but it wasn't a problem here on the South Shore. It isn't a problem on the North Shore. It's really an urban Metro West type of concern. So we are still looking. One of the other things that I think it's important to talk with families about, and I talked with Mark today just about reminding guidance counselors, is that even if your student isn't accepted into a vocational school for 9th grade, there are a number of seats available for 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. Again, something that Tom Hickey at South Shore Tech reiterated today. As students select their shops after the exploratory program, there are still openings in automotive or culinary arts for 10th graders to come into South Shore Tech as a 10th grader. So continuing to reach out and to apply. So,
Committee thoughts before we have our guests ask some questions?
It was very thorough, and I appreciate all the work you put into putting all this together, because it is really a lot of information. And I know you did. This isn't the first time you've done this research. You've been working on it all year, or for years really, but all year. So thank you very much for that.
right, and I think it's I try not to, but sometimes read Pembroke Connect and Facebook for comments. For me, it's not a value conversation. I value vocational education. My husband is a product of vocational education. We own a restaurant because he was able to go to a culinary art school in high school. Like, all of that resonates with me. It's not about value. And I think, the underlying really goal for all of this work is, where do our kids want to be successful, and how can we make that happen? And unfortunately, there isn't a ton within our purview right now to make that happen for kids, but I do feel like we are looking at every potential opportunity, trying to create partnerships, trying to create hands-on learning. There is not a quick and fast answer to this, so we're continuing to chip away at it.
Well, it looks like a few years ago, our plan was, as we made so like the school preference, and then when the policies changed, that really impacted that. Looks like you were ready to say something.
No, I didn't, believe it or not. I interrupted all through the thing, so thank you for putting up with
No
that.
worries.
Well, I'd be interested in some of the community input.
Sure. If you want to come up, just come to the microphone so the community can hear you on television. And if you just state your name and ask away.
And I will do my best to answer. Obviously, some of you will have really unique questions and unique situations that we don't necessarily have an answer for right this moment. But I will get back to you if I can't answer you thoroughly.
I do appreciate that you are looking into options for the VOTEC. I can see that you've done a lot of work. Both my older sons went to the VOTEC, so I haven't been up to date with what you've been doing. But what is the policy that was passed in 2022, if you can explain
So the
that?
change to the enrollment policy is that vocational regional school districts must accept every student in their member town that meets the minimum requirement. So before, it was an admissions process. So let's say, it's out of 100 points, their cut score was 75. They could take Pembroke kids that got greater than a 75. Now you have to take everybody in the member town that meets the minimum requirement. Let's say that was a 50. You got to take everybody before you can take anybody from outside.
And who passed this bill? How did this?
It's the state, so the
The
state
state?
change, yeah, it's the House of Representatives and the Senate here that passed the change, and it's,
So South Shore VOTEC had no, because I know that they passed that a few years back where they could take out of district
right, and so
kids.
that was the conversation
Yeah.
that I had with Tom today. He's like, just a few years ago, we changed our policy so we could take Pembroke kids. And it's really disheartening to have a decision made kind of above us that really has this detrimental effect to our students here, because it was working well here. I know that we weren't always getting, 20 seats at Social VOTEC, but we were getting a handful over the course of the years, and to now have that be zero is really hard.
And how many, so this was, you said this was stemmed from Boston?
Yeah. So
But
when you send a
Boston has
student to, when you send a
vocational
student to a
schools.
vocational school district, they send you a bill, right? And so the cost for a vocational education is higher than the cost for an in-district education. And so students in Boston were seeking out vocational opportunities outside of the Boston Public Schools district. So Boston is writing a check to, I think Blue Hills is in Canton, to Canton Public Schools for Blue Hills Regional. So, I think it was an attempt to curtail that, but there was an easier solution. That region could have just said, we're passing in our regional agreement to say, we're not taking non-member students, end of story. It didn't need to apply to everybody in the state. And when it first passed, at the end of the fiscal year before last, we were under the impression that individual districts could make changes to that policy, because you'll remember we talked about approaching Silver Lake, about making changes to that policy that would still allow us to go there. Again, with conversations with DESE and with their legal counsel, that isn't the case. But again, when the change first came out, the caveat to it was that individual regions could make the decision for themselves, and that's not the case.
Okay, because I'm a little confused. I know South Shore VOTEC is saying, well, I know they only have so many seats per town, and it is great on the grading system. So there will never be any seats left over if we applied, if a Pembroke kid applied, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought that there is a Pembroke kid going there this year.
So we're not transporting any students other than the 11th and 12th graders to there. If you lived in Rockland and were already granted admission and then moved to Pembroke, they honor your admission. So it's potential that there is a student that lives in Pembroke that used to live in Rockland that goes to South Shore VOTEC as a freshman, but they were never a Pembroke student. They didn't apply as a Pembroke student. So to say that there's never going to be any seats, that answer is that's not true. If the interest in seats from the member towns goes down, then there would be an opportunity for us. So,
So why can't our kids apply, just apply? I mean, and
they
if
did.
there's-
So all of our kids applied last year.
Okay.
Right? And we will,
They just weren't
and I've already
selected.
received the letters of interest to continue to apply. But right now, there's so many in-district students that meet the minimum criteria that there are no seats left for our students. But our students are still applying.
So their criteria, have they changed their criteria? No.
No. They're just now, you have to just only meet the minimum, where before you had to, excel in the interview and have a perfect attendance record and
Well,
whatever.
I mean, honestly, South Shore VOTEC, I've spoken with them. They are saying still that they're going by their old policy. They're saying the grading system, you have to excel. You have to get so many points with the interview. You have to, I mean, So I'm just confused. I mean, why?
I don't know what their minimum
Yeah.
criteria is. Their regional agreement would outline that. But before, they were taking, there was many students between the first Pembroke student and the minimum requirement. So they were taking our students before they
Oh,
were
yeah,
taking.
I know.
Right, and
I know
the
Pembroke
change
kids
in
were
chapter
getting in before
74 says they
Hanover
can't
kids
do
'cause
that
they
anymore.
scored higher, yeah.
Right.
But, I mean, I know Hanover kids right now that have pretty high scores, and they're saying that they may not get in.
Right.
So, there could potentially be seats left over, like you said, Cohasset, I know Norwell doesn't fill all their seats, so.
Right, but
our
those
kids can
those seats
still
get
apply.
redistributed. So if Cohasset has 13 seats and they fill 3, those 10 seats get redistributed to the member towns. Because every Abington, Hanover, Whitman, Hanson, Rockland, all have a wait list for their seats, right? So they used all 80 of the seats that they get, and they still have 15 students on their wait list. So those extra seats would go to those students first. If for some reason there isn't a wait list and there's still seats available, they would absolutely take our students, but they have to take every in-district minimum requirement student before they can take one of ours.
And just not even, I know it's really, really expensive to buy into Social Tech, but I mean, put money aside, what school would you want to be part of, Silver Lake or South Shore Tech?
I can't answer that.
Why? I
They're
mean,
different,
any
right? So
other-
the vocations that are offered they're not all the same. I do think when we first had this conversation about designating a school of preference and the school committee moved towards Silver Lake instead of South Shore Tech, we heard from families about the state of the shops over there, the technology over there versus South Shore Tech. Silver Lake is upgrading their shops. They are looking to expand their opportunities. To me, it's not one or the other. I just want kids to have a choice. I just want them to be able to go somewhere. Is Pembroke High School better than Hanover High School? It's one of those things. It's just the opportunity to have an opportunity. I don't care where the seat is. I want you to have an opportunity for a seat. And I do, several people have said, aren't our kids worth it? And I don't think there's anybody sitting at this table that doesn't believe your kids are worth it. The question is, would a debt exclusion override pass for $10 million for 10 seats at South Shore Tech? And I don't know if it would. That's for the committee to decide if South Shore Tech is interested in engaging with additional member towns, and that's the route we want to go down. Then the committee decides if that's a campaign that they want to embark on. That's.
So when we broke away from Silver Lake, I mean, we had that vocational option. We should have been thinking about it way back then. I mean, it wasn't going to go away. Yes, maybe the enrollment for.
So just to be clear, if you're going to talk, you just have to come up to the mic so the people at home can hear you. It doesn't project in the room, which is a misnomer,
If you
but
guys could do me a huge favor, I know we're getting a good line, so if you would sign the paper, we'll go in order of signature that way.
this is Mrs. Webster, I know
Yes,
her.
yes.
We're good.
Scotty's on my basketball,
Yeah.
or was on my basketball team.
So no, there was no agreement with Silver Lake, from my understanding, as part of the lovingly referred to as divorce on vocational opportunities for students. We broke away from a regional school district and became our own comprehensive high school.
Well, right, and Tommy, to your point, I think the reality is none of us were at the
we-
table 17 years ago.
Are we 100% sure there was nothing in writing about Pembroke kids going to Silver Lake after the split?
Well, there wasn't any agreement. In fact, there are some people who believe that we expressed great interest.
Sir, could you just come up to the mic so everybody can hear you?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I'm not aware of agreement. It sounds as though
no.
you were part of it and there wasn't
They wouldn't sign
one.
an agreement. We wanted an agreement. It was all part of the negotiation. They were using that as a wedge so that we wouldn't leave.
Right.
And so it was sort of a punishment. After a long time, when they needed to make better use of their facilities, they invited us back. But in the beginning, they didn't want
Right, and so I went to the school committee in Silver Lake in 2017 when we were designating them a school of preference because they needed to do something as well on their end for it to work. And it was a heated conversation. There are several members of that school committee that were part of the school committee when we split apart. And there were some old harbored feelings around Pembroke kids taking seats that Kingston, Plimpton, or Halifax students deserved. And so that was where the conversation around us sending students creates financial stability for them And there was capacity within their enrollment to take our kids. We weren't taking the seats away from anybody else. There was openings in their exploratory program for our kids to attend. So there's no written agreement for
I
students.
apologize. Did you say that they invited us back?
No. When she went back.
Through this process.
Through the
Oh,
process
I
of
just-
designating them as a school's preference.
My other
yeah.
question is, you said money-wise, $10 million, 10 spots. What is the exact number? Is it $10 million?
There is no exact number because the building project at South Shore Tech hasn't even started yet. They're in their feasibility phase, which means they don't even have a rendering, a drawing, they have nothing. So they're estimating the building project to be $250 million with $150 million reimbursement from MSBA, so $100 million spread amongst the member towns based on a proportion of enrollment.
And Marshfield has opted in to do?
So, no, Marshfield, the vote that Marshfield took in May of 2022 was to engage with South Shore VOTEC about being a part of their regional committee. So they are in conversations about the region, about joining, what it looks like financially, what it looks like for these 3 years prior to the building project taking effect, what it would look like after that, when debt would be assessed to Marshfield associated with the building project.
And that's
That
what-
has happened all summer. And now they're sharing their findings with their school committee and their select board in deciding whether or not to move forward and put an article on their spring town meeting in regards to joining South Shore VOTEC as a member of the region. Once that happens, then 6 of the 8 current member towns would also have a warrant on their town meeting, an article on their town meeting warrant to accept Marshfield into their region. And then that's when they would be, so the first class of students that they would be able to send is in September of 2024, if the commissioner signs the paper quickly. He has a calendar year to sign it. If he waits till December 31st to sign it, then it would be September of 2025.
And are we at that process? Are you doing?
No.
You're
No.
not? You haven't, none of
The-
like, exploratory committee?
We as a committee this committee has not moved in the direction to
So
join.
you guys have done nothing to like look forward into that, right? Is that what I'm understanding?
That's incorrect.
So I think your take on you've done nothing the past
No, I
50 minutes,
apologize.
the past 50
Rushworth
minutes
just
would
got
say
off
we've
work.
done a lot more
You
than
came in a
nothing.
little late. There was
I
just a
just
presentation.
came from work.
There was just a
Yeah, no worries.
presentation that showed what
I
we've been up to.
apologize.
So the conversations that we've had with South Shore VOTEC is that there's not necessarily an appetite right now, because when Marshfield opted in, the MSBA had not invited South Shore VOTEC into the feasibility study yet. Now that they are in the pipeline for the project, the appetite to add new members would not be until after the building project is complete. So it doesn't mean you all can't vote and put on the town meeting warrant to start the conversation. I'm telling you, the likelihood of that conversation landing anywhere before the building is done is slim to none based off of the feel from those members.
Hi, Maureen J.C. Just want, again, the pickle that you guys are in, and I appreciate all the creative options that you're trying to Band-Aid, if you will, in this situation. I just want to ask, is there a person on the committee that is designated as a liaison with Senator Moran and Representative Cutler currently? And who would that be, please?
David Boyle.
Thank you. Mr. Boyle, if you've had an opportunity to discuss this with Representative Cutler and Moran, if you wouldn't mind just sharing a brief overview, what that was and where they are in the process with us, and just a general summary, I would thank you, appreciate it.
Brett, and we've also invited them to your meeting in February to.
Yeah. Usually what we do is we ask them to come in February to discuss multiple topics, Chapter 70, funding, everything from there. Have I had this specific conversation? No, I have not. Is it a conversation we can have? Certainly.
Do you know if they're aware of the high interest in this local region of this issue that's happening as a result of that legislation they passed?
I think you'd have to ask them.
Okay.
I can't speak on their behalf, but we brought up everything with them to, mandatory, what's the word I'm looking for? Unfunded mandates, we're constantly talking to them. I always joke whenever Josh and I run into each other around town, it's always some kind of a conversation. It's, hi, how are the kids? And then you get into something.
The VOTEC's never been brought up as far
Right, but
as...
so Senator Moran, as well as a representative from Josh Cutler's office, was at the presentation that our Pathways Coordinator made to the Chamber of Commerce last week, so.
Cole, is it Cole?
Was it Cole? No, I don't think it was Cole.
I don't think so.
Cole usually comes.
Yeah.
Cole. So they were there, I think they were interested in the conversation, because though the purpose of that presentation was to create some relationships in the community with business partners, the conversation did have a vocational side to it, and they were able to hear some of that. So I do think they're aware that it's on their radar, but, it's obviously a topic that, David, if you feel you want to reach out ahead of February and chat with them about it, great. It's also something that I'll include as we tell them what to prep for February.
I think also we actually, now with the redistricting, we have to throw Representative Lenatra into that.
Yep.
She was
Yeah,
there.
she's never been here before,
She
so
was there
she
last
picked
week,
up the
too.
Bryanville section of Pembroke with the new alignment.
Good to know, good to know, okay.
Yeah, so I said, she's someone else we can reach out to.
What is that name, I'm sorry?
It's Kathy Lenatra, I believe. I
That's
don't
right.
know how to spell Lenatra. right?
That's right.
Great, thank you for your time.
Hi, it's Mike Quinn, and, I've noticed in my time living in Massachusetts my whole life, a lot of times what the state does is they make these laws to fix one problem, and then they create 10 other problems. And then what they do is they go back a few years later and fix that. So I guess what I want to say is, they've created this problem, essentially. This law basically created this problem where now Pembroke kids aren't able to get into VOTEC schools. So I guess what I want to say is, what can we all do, an actionable item or something that we can all do to get the state to reverse this law or just amend it? Because they eventually will when there's enough, when there's enough demand, they'll eventually fix it, but, that could be 4 or 5 years down the road. I think we need to get it, done as quick as possible, so. Is that a
Right,
matter
I
of
mean,
just getting in touch with Cutler
echoing
or
what Aaron said
Moran, or-
earlier, and you just heard our representatives, right?
Yeah,
Our job as
this is-
citizens is to reach out them and let them know it's an important issue for us. From a committee level and from a district level, obviously, we're going to be doing the same. So the more voices that can be heard,
Yeah.
I think the better the message gets.
So
right?
we should just keep barraging them, so it would be Moran, Cutler, and Lenatra.
But I think the other thing you need to understand is where we're so spread out, and someone like Josh Cutler will represent Duxbury, Hanson, Pembroke, whatever. The city of Boston probably has a half a dozen reps,
Yeah.
3 senators. I don't know the exact layout of Roslindale, Hyde Park, and all those type of things. So we're up against kind of tough competition. We're on the outside looking in.
Right.
And we're asking for something, and a group of them kind of get together, and, if you look at Boston, Springfield, Lowell, Lynn, Worcester, there's a concentration of people there all with the
Yeah.
same cause. We basically got,
Pembroke's an
is Hanson going to have our
afterthought,
back?
really.
Is Duxbury going to want to get
Yeah.
involved? Does Josh sit there and say, I don't know, there's nothing I can do? I don't know, I don't want to speak for him.
Right, yeah.
But, and I would suggest you partner. Pembroke doesn't work in a silo, and on any different issue. I mean, years ago, when the gas tax was a hot ticket item across the state, communities partnered with one another, and then, a community that has one rep suddenly has 50 reps.
Well,
Yeah.
especially where ours shares the district with Duxbury, right? And they're
Yeah.
also going through this situation. Obviously, Josh is going to want to have a voice that's pretty strong for several of his communities that he's supporting, so.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And
so it's really a
there's
matter of
skin in
all
the
of us
game for-
banding together with all the other towns and trying to have one big voice heard, I guess, to amend this and fix the issue that they created.
That's the faster potential way of getting
Yeah.
our kids into a school opportunity, right?
Because there's a vested interest by the communities that are already a part of that set, what is it, 5 out of 7 or 7 out of 9 potentially. There's a vested interest for them too, to have this weight
Yeah.
lifted.
And
So-
do we know what other communities are having the same issue? Is Duxbury one of them, or?
So yeah,
is it-
Duxbury is the same as us. They're not a member of any regional agreement for vocational. Again, the interest amongst Duxbury 8th graders to go to a vocational school is proportionally less than ours. So I think they had 4 students at South Shore VOTEC before, as opposed to the years where we've had 18 or 20. So I don't know that the community outcry is the same level there as it is here. I'm happy to reach out to Danielle Klingham and the superintendent there and see, if together she and I can, engage with Commissioner Riley around it. So pressure from your state senators, pressure from the DESE about the adverse effect that this is having on students is absolutely, there's pieces that I can do from my side that I'm happy to do. But there aren't a ton of towns in the place where we're at, but there are a couple.
And there are probably some that are having trouble getting all of their kids in. I'd imagine there's going to be some towns that say if they have 10 kids that want to get in, they can only get 7 in or something like
Right.
that, I'd imagine, right?
Right.
Well, on a quick count, I just counted about 20 people. I would bet if Senator Moran, Representative Cutler, Representative Lafter got 20 phone calls tomorrow from concerned citizens, I think it's going to send a bit of a message.
That's a good
You know,
point.
they're going to talk to us, politics,
Yep.
They hear it from citizens, from people who have skin in the game, kids that want to go. They have to respond. You can't say that one guy called me, who cares?
Right.
There's roughly 20. I can't see everybody out there, you're probably hiding. But you got 20 voices out there,
Yeah,
And
especially
we're
if
happy to help.
everyone barrages them at once, as opposed to 20 people calling over, 50 days. If everyone calls in 1 or 2 days, then it makes more of an impact, I'd imagine.
I would think so.
Yeah, and get
Thank you.
friends and family around the Pembroke area to do the same. So you've got 20 people here, talk to people, talk to your neighbors, and talk to other parents. Get as many people as possible to call.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
So just a reminder, as Pam kind of makes her way up, if you're home and you have a question, scinfo@pembroke12.org. There's just somebody that asks in the mailbox if you can ask questions in real time. So if you type in a question, and happy to take a look and answer it if we can, but it's scinfo@pembroke12.org.
Right. So there's
So
that
there's
route.
at least
and
one person viewing it at home right now.
Yes, and remember, we are on television, so others are watching, so yes.
Pam Baroni. I just have a question about if our kids are no longer accepted at these vocational schools, what's it doing for the kids that really need to go to these schools? So those kids that have trouble sitting behind a desk or are hands-on learners and all that. I mean, where's the free and appropriate public education for those kids is what I'm wondering.
Right, and so I think that there's nine students that are on our radar that really, we're hoping for a vocational opportunity in the 9th grade instead of Pembroke High School. We know who they are. Our Pathways Coordinator, Mary Ellen, is working to create opportunities for them that has some sort of hands-on opportunity, trying to, get an idea of what their interests are, see if we can make a connection for them in the community, in the business sector, and in the field that they're interested in, to get them some hands-on opportunities, and, giving them high school credit for it. So those conversations are starting. There's,
But is that outside of school or is that part of the school?
so meaning like work study? Is that-
Yeah, these hands-on, like, I went to the Pathways meeting, and that sounds great, but it's 6 weeks, and kids need a lot more than 6 weeks in order to do something like that.
Yeah,
I mean,
so at this point, it would be outside of school hours, weekends, afternoons, vacations, summers, they can get paid for that. But that's not to say, we've talked a lot about, is there a way to schedule at the high school where students have just their core requirements in the morning and then are free to engage in business opportunities and hands-on opportunities in the afternoon? We don't have a static schedule right now at the high school, but that is something that we've talked about. And if there's something that we can do to make it work for a kid, we're happy to do that.
I guess I'm just kind of picking up still from last year, or whatever, with all the COVID and all that stuff and all the, the kids are struggling, a lot of kids are going to therapists and all this stuff, and just, if they could be in a different learning environment with the hands-on and stuff. I have a senior now, and my other one's 21, so I'm just speaking for the kids, like, down the road, as a mom,
No, and I think you hit on it. I think the reality of it is a lot of it's going to have to be individualized, right, for now, until we can figure it out.
It's emergent, so I don't know, is there something is there somebody at the education board that you had mentioned in your speech, somebody at the education board, is that somebody we can reach out to?
Yeah,
as
so,
well?
I'll reach out to Commissioner Riley. As parents, you're also welcome to reach out to Commissioner Riley, so that he can inform the board from the Department of Elementary Secondary Education, the adverse effect that this change has had on students like Pembroke. He's not a voting member of that board, but I do think it's important for it to be on his radar that communities like Pembroke, and, we're not alone. I don't know what the like communities in Pembroke on the North Shore look like and what their options are, but I can do some research and see if I can find a group of us that are willing to get together and put some pressure on DESE in regards to, what are you doing for our kids? Because you got to do something, right? You can't tell us it's a 3-year process to get a Chapter 74 license and then say our kids can't go anywhere.
Right, you're leaving them hanging.
Like what? What do we do for 3 years then? So.
And just the other thought is, while you're hashing over all these numbers and how much it costs and all that, also think about how much it might save in some kind of IEP services when the kid's actually happier, doing hands-on and needs less supports. Just wanted you to think about that.
Well, yeah,
Thank
and to your point, I don't think from our standpoint, the money's not an issue, because we're going to present, if the need is, we'll present it to the community. It's going to be a.
No, that's
yeah,
right. I just
Yeah.
mean, think about the plus sides
Absolutely.
as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah.
Hi, guys. So most of my questions did get answered, so thank you so much. Which is
Can you just state your name? So
Oh, sorry, Melissa Hooley.
Thank you, Melissa.
I just had one question, because I think I might have missed it. David, I just didn't hear when you said you are going to reach out to the state reps on behalf of the...
I'll call them tomorrow.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Just
no,
wanted-
you said usually we bring them in around February.
Yeah.
It depends on their schedule. We have 2 meetings a month, first and third.
Right.
Believe it or not, trying to coordinate 2 is hard enough. Now with 3, I think it's going to be a bit of a challenge, but we'll get them here. And
Yeah,
hopefully you
but
guys will
just
be in the
having you
audience.
reach out on behalf of the
It's for our
committee
behalf
is
of the
huge.
committee for awareness, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, I think it's great that you guys are encouraging us to reach out to our state reps. You guys are elected officials, right? You should be reaching out on our behalf as well. So I expect all of you to be calling our state reps and telling them, the Pembroke School Board, we need to get these kids into technical schools. I think you guys are dropping the ball by not reaching out to them. I mean, you said you identified about 8 kids at the high school. I'm not sure if you guys identify the kids at the middle school that need to go to tech schools, but,
That's what she's referring to.
oh, I thought she was talking about
No,
ninth grade.
incoming 8th graders for next year, what do we do for them? And we've
So
identified.
the ninth graders that couldn't get anywhere this year, what are we doing for them at the high school was, I think, the
This year, and
basis
then-
of the question.
Right, Tom,
Right.
and then that same process for the next grades until we can fix the bigger
Folks,
issue. Yeah.
listen, you guys, you have a little power, you guys are elected. You guys gotta start reaching out to them too. Shaking that tree. I mean, all these parents here that have kids going in next year into the high school and know that their kids aren't school kids, they're work kids. They want to work. They want to learn a trade. Guys, this is wrong on a lot of levels. Them not being able to go to Silver Lake or South Shore Boat. And I'm not trying to get on a milk carton out. I'm just saying, figure it out, guys. We'll call, but you guys better call too. Get in touch with start talking to them. Governor, whoever the hell you guys know, start talking to them.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tom. Maureen?
Hi, again, Maureen J.C. I would ask, is it possible, as a community member, I could ask for the agenda next month, or whenever your next meeting, or whatever you have time, to include a discussion about the relationship legally that you have with DESE and their authority over you as the board. As a community, I would like to learn more about that. This is bringing back bad trauma regarding a mask mandate that DESE put on you as a school committee member that you had to fall in line with due to purse strings that we had to succumb to their authority. Here we are again with the VOTEC issue. I know that this authority is not coming from them. I understand that. However, the word DESE has come into the conversation tonight, and I would like to discuss if there is a way, do we have an option to remove the authority of DESE over us? And again, that's another thing I would like our representatives to discuss. I know there's purse strings attached to this, but I feel like we're hostage. We have no freedom to make any decisions of anything, it seems. And if you could please add it to the agenda, if possible, thank you.
Happy to take a stab at it, Lance. I don't know what it'll look
Yeah,
like.
well, and just so for my own clarity too, this was a state level decision, not a DESE decision, correct?
The change in Chapter 74 was not a DESE decision, it was a state-level decision.
Yeah,
The
this was
change in
not a-
Chapter 74 was a state-level decision, it wasn't a DESE decision, though we have used the term DESE, and, I can appreciate the trauma that, if the PTSD it brings back, Maureen, I get that. I'm happy to put together an overview of, it's Massachusetts general law that outlines what the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education is responsible for and how they govern school districts. I'm happy to put that together and share a slide or two all of that is on the Department of Elementary and Secondary's website, as well as the State of Massachusetts website, but I'm happy to capture the information in one spot for you if you think that will be helpful.
Their meetings are at 10 a.m. during the week, so it's not like they represent us, but we can't go to them. I can't think of.
Oh, I know, yep.
In Chelsea, to go to a meeting is insane. We try to get a virtual Zoom call, that's a miracle. I'll call the department to try to get a Zoom call. Trying to get somebody, trying to get Jeff O'Reilly to speak to him, good luck. You must have a direct private line, because he does not talk to people who he represents, at least not me. So if you have any suggestion in our meeting on this agenda, on how we can get them to speak up, because there's 12 people that sit on that board, they all live in Newton. I don't know if they even know what Pembroke is. Thank you.
Hey, everybody. My name's Katie Capuzzos. I'm really feeling all this because I've been like gearing up to be here this week, and I think everybody in this room has. And you guys have done a wonderful job. The presentation was excellent, and I'm not the type of person that can sit here and talk about the past and the problems, and we need to figure it out. What's the solution to it? And I can't wait. I don't even know how many meetings you guys have. Is it once a month, every other month?
It's the first and third Tuesday of the month generally.
Oh.
So 2 meetings a month.
That's pretty often, actually. Okay.
During COVID, it was every day. We met every day.
So one thing I thought of was like, could us parents get together for maybe some type of subcommittee of the subcommittee, or like, do you have any suggestions on that? Because sometimes when you're having school meetings, you have many different topics to discuss, and the vocational topic could take up the whole meeting. So is like a subcommittee
Yeah, so
option where we can focus just mainly on that?
We've had a series of roundtable conversations started this year. Obviously, the first one was about social emotional learning. We talked about achievement. I'm happy to post an opportunity for families to come together and talk about vocational education, and maybe you all want to send a representative to hear the conversation at that meeting. That might be a better way
That's
to
a
kind
great
of
idea.
engage in more back and forth, where you don't have to stand at a microphone and tell me your name and your address and whatnot. So really just, candid conversation about, where are you feeling let down? What are some ideas you might have? A lot of you in the audience work in trades, have opportunities. We want to make connections with you because you have potential placements for our kids, right? So, when we met with the Chamber of Commerce last week, there were parents there, but they're parents that own a landscaping business, or parents that own, Andrew Sullivan from Protect-A-Wire. Like, that's not a vocation that we have. That's not a pathway for us, but he'd be happy to take a kid and teach them the business there. So, making those connections, and I think that happens in a smaller setting than this. I don't think this is really how that happens. So I'm happy to put together some time and some opportunities for folks to come together and talk about this and kind of harness our energy, right? Because I think everybody in this room is passionate about it, and that's great. As parents, all of us are passionate too, and when it comes to our kids, we'd be doing the exact same thing if we felt like that's what they needed. And, we want to make sure that you all have an opportunity to share your ideas and share your issues, right? You can be mad. It's okay to be mad. I get it. I'm mad too. But what do we do with that? How do we fix this?
Well, what did Marshfield do 6 months ago, and how do we catch up with Marshfield? Because Pembroke abuts Hanover, and also, we were already we didn't buy in, but, I mean, I'm almost 40 years old, and friends of mine from Pembroke always went to the VOTEC.
Right.
I almost went to the VOTEC. Pembroke's been a part of the VOTEC for years. That's great that Marshfield's about to buy in. But what did they do that we can't catch up in 6 months?
Right, and so
That
the
we were
difference
part of
in-
for 40 years.
And the difference is,
I
so
don't mean to be
we've been a
angry
part
at
of
you. I'm
Sil-
frustrated.
Yeah,
I'm
no,
not
we've-
angry at you.
We've been a part of Silver Lake. South Shore Tech is a separate entity. Our students have always flowed back and forth from Silver Lake since we've split from them. South Shore VOTEC, the difference of what happened with Marshfield 6 months ago and why it's a multi-year process now for us is because they're in the pipeline for a building project. That's all it is, right? So we could do the same thing in May that Marshfield did last May, and it would still be 2025 before they'd be talking with us about joining, because they're in a building project. They need to stabilize their enrollment and their debt and all of their member town numbers in order to put their project together. So they're not looking to take on new people right now.
Okay, so that was one of the 10 options that you mentioned. So
Yep.
can we get a list of the 10 options?
So this presentation will be posted to the website under the school
Okay.
committee tab.
Great, and what about the financials? It really wasn't broken down as far as taxpayers go? Because
So
as much
there's no number right now. I don't have any idea what the building project in South Shore VOTEC is going to cost at the end of the day. I have no idea what our proportional share of enrollment would be for eighth graders. There's no number, there's no exact number to put on it. So what you heard us say was the estimate is $9 to $10 million per member. Our proportional share of enrollment is about 12 to 14% on this year's current eighth grade. The repercussions on the average household are based off of when they went out for the community center and borrowed for that. There's no number to put on this right now. If we were going to embark on a debt exclusion override, that would still be 2 to 3 years from now, because we would need to vote in May to approach South Shore VOTEC about becoming a part of their regional agreement, spend 6 to 8 months with the financial piece of it, and then you'd be going out for an override the following year to households with the accurate information on the costs associated with the building project, the capital, the stabilization, and the tuition costs. There's no number to say what it is.
But you did say that Mr. Hickey over at VOTEC said that 10th grade Pembroke kids have the opportunity to go
Absolutely,
there.
there are seats available in their shops. So if you have a ninth grader at Pembroke High School that was hoping to get into Silver Lake or to South Shore VOTEC and didn't get in, they should apply as a 10th grader. There are spaces for culinary, automotive, a couple of the other shops. Right, metal fabrication, which is one of their, most highly sought after at vocations, doesn't have any spaces, but there are still spaces in spots at South Shore VOTEC for upperclassmen.
But they'll need to pick their shop. They will not get the exploratory experience.
Correct, they would just be they'd just be placed in a spot in an open shop. So, you would apply to South Shore VOTEC, they would let you know which spots were available, and you would pick from those that are available.
So at 15 years old, they don't get the option of exploring 4 different shops, plumbing, electric, or as a woman, cosmetology, nursing, maybe plumbing.
Right, so they don't even
electric.
have those at South Shore VOTEC. They don't have plumbing, they don't have cosmetology.
They have
Those aren't-
cosmetology. 2 of my friends are the instructors over there, Miss Darling and Miss Profit. I'm also a cosmetologist. I also own an advanced cosmetology
Oh, sorry,
school
they have cosmetology.
here
I was
in
thinking about Silver
Pembroke.
Lake.
And my whole family is of trades, and I'm totally passionate about this. I can tell this whole group is, and I'm not happy about 10th grade. I mean, they're not going to even be able to get that experience. And I moved to Pembroke in 2010. One of the reasons we broke away from Silver Lake, we finally had our own high school, but also we had the option of VOTEC. I know we also have the option of the Aggie, which is great. My brother went there. He still does the trade that he learned there that day, from when he graduated. But I just, we pay a lot of money here in Pembroke, and to not have an option, and to not already be talking to Marshfield or Duxbury or, neighboring towns, maybe we need to look at, what did Plymouth do? Plymouth is on its own, in their own vocational. Weymouth is on its own. There's just so much I like.
Right, and just for transparency, the demographics of a Plymouth, a Taunton, a Weymouth are very different than Pembroke. The financial base there is very different than Pembroke. A comprehensive high school with a vocational complement to it is much larger. It's in larger communities than Pembroke. There isn't, there's an economy of scale there. There's definitely, more funding available in larger towns than in a town like Pembroke for that,
But to your point, I think we're going to exhaust from a committee standpoint every avenue we can, because we know the importance of it, right? My son's an 8th grader. I know several of his friends where they should be next year, right?
Right.
Because that's their passion, that's where their strength is. And I don't know if we're going to be able to get to that point to give them that right away, but what resources in the meantime can we do to support them so we can keep working on the bigger picture and hopefully meet them individually in the meantime? So obviously, we're going to try to address both of those. How do we support our individual students while we're continuing to have that larger conversation to fix the bigger problem, right?
Okay. Thank you for your time.
Just one more question. So, my son has dyslexia, it's pretty bad. I guess my question is this, so if he gets accepted at Landmark, is Pembroke going to support him and allow him to go there?
So a couple of things. First of all, it's not our place to talk about individual students in this setting. If you
I
have a question
apologize, I didn't
specific
want to,
about
but
your student,
my question
happy to
is-
talk to you offline. Landmark is a private school. So that would be the same as me saying I want to send my son to BC High and Hanover should pay for it. That's a different conversation. It's not a public school. It's not a public education.
Okay.
All right, seeing no one else, sure. Can you just go up?
Kelly, you got to go to the mic.
Kelly, can you just go to the mic for us?
I know.
I don't understand, why didn't they apply in 10th grade?
Because not all of the seats, not all of the shops are enrolled. So if they have 25 seats in automotive and only 13 kids from the 9th grade exploratory select automotive, then there's 12 seats in automotive.
So why are those seats not all full if they're at their capacity? and
So
they
some
can't
kids
take-
go back to their district, right? So some kids do a 9th
Yeah,
grade
that's
exploratory.
true. That is true.
So there are some spots available for 10th grade and on at South Shore Tech. Some kids do go back. We have had kids come back, so.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't have a child that's even interested in going. I just know that this is a high need.
It's a big thing,
and,
yeah.
It's just an interest of mine. So, no, I do know kids that have got accepted in 10th grade, not from Pembroke, but from Halifax, and they've been successful. They didn't get the shop that they wanted, but they still get the experience. So I would encourage, if your kids don't get in 9th grade, apply in 10th.
Right.
Yeah.
I would also take a guess, and I'm not sure if this is kind of the right thing to say. You might be able to go in, say it's a culinary shop, but once you're in that school, I think you have a better chance of probably moving around. I don't know. I
No,
don't
so
wanna
once
speak-
you're in a shop in 10th grade, it's really where you stay for 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. It's a little bit more difficult to switch as you get further through the grades, just to
Right.
meet the criteria to get the certificate or to get the training or to.
Okay.
move on.
One other thought I had, they offer in the summertime, the South Shore VOTEC, they offer different programs, and they encourage kids that are interested in going to their school to take the programs. Is there any way, because you're looking into the pathways, is there any way that you could, because the pathways, it sounds like a lot of that's going to be after school, or, I mean, are you able to offer those classes to, could you talk to the South Shore VOTEC and see if you can offer those classes to the
Right,
kids
that's
here
part of the
at Pembroke?
conversation that Tom and I were just having today about how can we use his space and some of his staff that's willing to stay outside of their regular day to get some experience for kids. And summer's absolutely an opportunity for that as well.
And would that be something that you, the town obviously would pay for the kid? It
Right.
wouldn't be at a cost of?
Right, no.
Yeah, okay.
Right. You know, obviously, we'd like to tie it to high school credit, so you'd get an elective credit or something for it, right? You want kids to have a meaningful purpose in it. So, yeah, if that's the path we go down, it would be something that we would be sending students to.
And that's something that I don't think Silver Lake offers. I know several people that have taken classes over there, and I've heard nothing but great things about it.
Right, I mean,
so.
it's rare that you find a 13-year-old that knows what they want to be when they grow up, solid, right? There are some, but I do think, you know, even if you were able to have some opportunity over the summer going into 9th grade, even if you're not going to South Shore VOTEC, but some opportunity to explore, it gives you a better idea of what you're interested in.
Oh,
You know,
absolutely.
some of the computer tech pieces that they have as part of that vocation there are pieces of that in our high school with some of the computer science, some of the robotics, some of the tech repair. There are pieces of it there. So it might help you, inform you what electives to take at Pembroke High School that could meet some of your interests. So I do think that there's a value to that exposure, even if you're not going there in 9th grade. So I hear you.
Sir?
Adam Kadutis. What can we do to bring our shop classes back to Pembroke? Wood shop, power systems, drafting. I graduated there, and I took all those classes.
Sure. So there is a space at Pembroke High School that was a wood shop in years past. There is no air circulation or ventilation in that classroom. I don't even know if it's a classroom. In that space, there's no circulation or airflow in there. There's no HVAC, there's no heat, there's no air conditioning, and there's no filtration of air. You know, we talked about that because the wood shop at Pembroke High School does come up a lot because many people remember going there and there being a wood shop. In order to retrofit that space to be a shop a space where you could have that type of learning, you would have to open up the building envelope for the entire building. So tying into the electrical, the HVAC, the plumbing, the heating, the air conditioning. Pembroke High School, though, contrary to what folks may believe, is not a new building. You know, opening up the HVAC system to retrofit that space would be quite expensive. It's not necessarily at what the current building code is for a lot of things, so you'd have to make those improvements building-wide. And we don't necessarily have a faction of students that's interested in woodworking. We do obviously poll students on what their interests are as far as when we're looking to offer additional electives. Woodworking isn't one that kids have come to us about. Home ec has come up a couple of times. We did offer it at the middle school, and we looked to see if there's a space that we could offer it as an elective at the high school. But we do have those conversations with kids as we're going through the process. But that particular space at Pembroke High School isn't up to the building code at all.
Well, to your point, and I think as we weigh the finances of what options to go, I think we would put that on the table to say, all right, as an option, what would it cost us, so that we know externally it'll cost us to go here, internally to fix, it would cost us that. So that would definitely be something we'd look at, absolutely.
And that was a lot of the dialogue when we were touring the Hatch building. We were kind of peppering, saying, well, could we do something like that? Obviously, it's not a huge footprint, but we were asking that when we were walking through, thinking, it's a building that's ours, but it's just not a great building, unfortunately.
And anything we do is going to cost money, so.
It's not just about the money, though, right? So the wood shop transitioned into a drafting-like class for a period of time at the high school. There was a staff member associated with it. There were several electives that ran through it. Those electives stopped running because students stopped selecting them.
Yeah.
So the program of studies has a comprehensive listing of things that we offer at Pembroke High School, but we only run the things that kids elect to take. And so, that program in itself, student interest dwindled, and, there was no longer a need for that. But we can absolutely, have a conversation about putting those opportunities back out there, polling kids again. Again, when we polled the middle schoolers and the current ninth graders about the pathways, there was interest in biomedical, there was interest in, CAD/CAM manufacturing. So those are some of the interests that we're trying to harness. Veterinary support was one of the other high interest areas for students. So
And we
again,
did that pulsing fairly recently,
it was last year. Yep.
I thought we had been briefed on that.
If I might just ask, is there any CARES money that's unspent that could be used for HVAC for the retrofitting of that room that you referenced?
Right, so we have earmarked a huge portion of the CARES money, or the it's the ESSER money, the money that comes directly to the schools is the ESSER money for replacement of 7 HVAC units at Pembroke High School, 7 of 26. So it's
26 and needed to be replaced?
So many of the HVAC units at Pembroke High School were existing to remain from Silver Lake, which means they're 43 and 45 years old. So,
Those take precedent.
So we are starting. We're, the ones that don't work and the oldest ones are the process. And if you've kind of watched what's happened at town meeting for the past few years, we've asked for 1 or 2 HVAC units every spring as part of the capital project to replace that, but not the electrical, not the plumbing. Just this past year, we had to replace the fixtures in all of the science labs. So the building is older, right? And we are fortunate to be in a NEASC accreditation cycle. Some of the feedback that comes out of those type of things is about your facilities and your upkeep, and whether or not a new building is something you should be thinking and talking about. So,
Is that discussed in the capital budget meetings?
The capital budget is discussed at town meeting, yes.
No, a new building in 20 years, what's the life expectancy of
So
the
I think
current
that's
high
part of the
school?
work that master plan committee is going to do, is to have a more than 1 year view and vision for the town. And a new school buildings absolutely needs to be somewhere on that. It's not this year, right? But
It's on your radar, though.
It's definitely on my radar.
Thank you.
So I think just kind of in summary, obviously we're, as you heard, we're exploring all the different options, right? And I think I can't iterate enough the value we have in this, so I hope you guys understand that. We're in strong support. We all have students especially I have an 8th grader that's coming into this process, and his friends, I see it firsthand, and I have faces and names in my head that I know need this program, right? So I'm gonna fight for them, just like I'm gonna fight for your children who I don't even know yet, right? And that's our job here, is to do that. So there isn't a stone we won't unturned to try to get the best education for them that's gonna meet their needs where they're at. Obviously, options, some have small consequences, others have large consequences. So we're going to do the best we can through that process, but know that this dialogue will continue. We'll have more of these. I know we've talked about having a focus group, so be on the outlook for that as that comes out. And then I know our next meeting is next week for the holidays coming up, and then we'll take a little break until January, but that will be on our focus as we move forward throughout this time.
I just want to say I really appreciate everybody's input tonight. I mean, it really does help us to know where, what people are thinking, and even if it's negative, it's really valuable, and I'm glad you spoke up, and thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Focus group was a great idea, too. That's good.
My addition would be, if you have some friends, husbands, wives, uncles, grandparents, the more phone calls that our public officials get, ourselves included, it gets your attention, okay? All we can ask is for your help. And then if it does get to town meeting, we need the support. You know, you've got to be able to get through town meeting. If you guys have ever attended those can be very interesting. The tide changes night by night, so, thank you.
But thank you all. Our next agenda item is school committee, or school field trips.
So in your packet, you have a number of field trips that you have already conceptually approved, but there's additional details in them as far as the cost, the number of students. So the DECA trip to Quincy in December, the next level of DECA, which is their trip to Boston in March that students at the December meeting qualify for, and then the final one, the handful of students that qualify in Boston to go to Orlando in April. Those are all in your packet, as well as you had conceptually approved the trip to Spain in February and the trip to England in April, so there's just some additional information in those field trip request forms.
Do we have any representation on this to share? Are we good with?
Yeah, no, the DECA ones are annual.
Right.
We've, in the past, there's been years where we haven't sent anyone to the last step, but in years past, we've sent one or two students, but.
And the travel company's not the same as the.
So it's not a travel company,
Same
right?
thing.
The travel company for DECA isn't a travel company, it's DECA.
Right, because students get themselves there.
Correct. And then the trips to Spain and to England are reputable international travel companies that we've worked with in the past, so awesome.
Do we take them at once?
Yep, so let's do them all together. Do I have a motion for consideration of approval for the DECA trip to Quincy, the DECA trip to Boston, the DECA trip to Orlando, Florida, the trip to Spain, and the trip to England?
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, the ayes have it. I believe Aaron is sliding over to give us a budget update. Or school budgeting 101. So I brought the glasses.
So there are 29 or 30 slides here. My intent is not to go slide by slide for you all, you can read. And this is really supposed to be a resource document. So it has been several years since there's been a lesser institutional knowledge of budgeting and the budget process. So this is a resource document for you all. Everything in it is a hyperlink to various things associated with school budgeting.
And I would encourage our listening public, this is a great document for you as well, right? As you want to understand this budget process that we go through as a committee, this is a great tool for you to help understand that as well. Obviously, a lot of numbers get thrown from now until the month of May and June. So this will be a great tool for you. So I encourage you to, the link will be on the site after our meeting.
Right, so I'm just going to highlight a couple of things that are in here. Again, not going to go slide by slide, but just talking a little bit about what the educational options are for families. You know, you can attend your home district, you can attend a school outside of your home district, whether it's through the school choice program, which Pembroke doesn't accept students in for school choice, but our students are able to go to other districts as part of school choice. So whether, if Whitman-Hanson is accepting ninth graders, our students can go there. Charter schools are an option for students, vocational technical education. though limited, is an option for our students. Commonwealth virtual schools are an option for our students. Families often elect, or sometimes elect, private education or homeschooling. So there's links to all of that there, and a family's guide to how to make the right choice for your family is also linked there. Each of those types of education is funded a little bit differently. Like, obviously, as a public school district, we're funded through the tax levy, Chapter 70, and local receipts. Those districts that you attend outside of Pembroke, but are other school districts, it's usually an offset from our cherry sheet, so that is town to town. So the town of Pembroke pays the town of Whitman. It doesn't come through our budget, we don't get a bill for the student. For vocational education, as I said before, that comes directly from our budget, so whatever our allocation is from the town, depending on the number of students that we have going to vocational schools, the bill is sent directly to us. Obviously, private education and homeschooling is a parent decision. The next few slides are just talk a little bit about what financial literacy is in terms of public school. I'm not going to go through those slides, but you know, the intent is to really maximize what you have to put forth the best program for students. And there are definitely a lot of steps that go into doing that. So, sorry, understanding our school committee policies, municipal finance law, personnel laws, how enrollment, community trends, all of that changes. And then really how do we do it here in Pembroke? There's several different ways to school budget, which I'll highlight in a few minutes. Which one do we use and why do we use it? If you cannot sleep at night some night, municipal finance law is riveting. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. I'm looking right at you, Mike, right at you. There are 14 links there to the various laws that govern municipal finance, everything from Chapter 30B, which governs how we purchase things, through how, let's say, 150E, which governs how the collective bargaining process works. So all of those are linked there for you to read at your leisure, but there are several laws associated with school finance that we must follow. If there's something you see that you want me to stop and talk more about, please just let me know. You know, there's a ton of different players in the financial piece to it. So there's obviously us that sit here, myself here in Pembroke. I am fortunate enough to be the superintendent and the school business administrator. That is just an amazing opportunity. Thank you for that. There's a town accountant, there's a town advisory committee, there's a town manager. We engage with the Department of Revenue, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, for our preschool students and our kindergarten students, the Department of Early Education and Care, for our school nurses, the Department of Public Health, the Attorney General, the Inspector General, as well as independent auditors. So there's lots of eyes on school budgeting, there's lots of stakeholders and players as we talk through all of the different pieces associated with it. We've talked a lot about different kinds of funding sources. Maureen earlier was talking about some of the state grant money. So obviously districts are able to get funds through Chapter 70, which is the largest funding source we have. There's grants out there. There are grants at the federal, state, and local level that we apply for. We have revolving funds. So revolving funds are any fees that are taken, or any dollars that are taken in from fee-based programs. So preschool is a fee-based program, transportation, athletics, building use, anything we take in is considered a revolving account. That means there's no fiscal year on those dollars. You can carry them year to year. But they need to be spent for a specific purpose. So if funds come into the athletic revolving account, we need to spend them for athletic reasons. We can't be using it for, you know, performing arts. Circuit breaker is another large funding source for us when we start to talk about special education. So circuit breaker is a reimbursement system from the state in regards to special ed tuition and services for our students. So they set a threshold each year. That threshold's dollar amount increases every year. I think it's $44,000 this year, give or take. And they reimburse any expense that a district, any qualifying expense that a district has in association with a student's special education placement and cost above that threshold at a rate set annually. So this year's reimbursement rate for circuit breaker is 75%. It has been as low as 34%, but when it was originally proposed, it was proposed as 100% reimbursement. So it fluctuates depending upon how much money is set aside in the budget for the state year over year. Again, that is something that you guys often talk with representatives about, just making sure that circuit breaker is fully funded. I can't even see the slides, they're so far away. There is also a great organization that talks, that, you know, that has some really helpful slides and explanations of school finance. It is the Government Financial Officers Association, GFOA. So they they put on a lot of web-based seminars on school budgeting, if you have interest and want to kind of walk through that. But it takes people all the way through the process on, how you plan and prepare, how you implement, how you set priorities, all of that. So that is a good resource for folks to have. Again, everything that's blue is a link, so there's just different reporting structures that we need to follow. So there's a uniform Massachusetts accounting system that governs the way that we expend our money. The DESE Chart of Accounts governs the way our account strings work. So you all will generally get an all funds budget from me that has like a 30-character account string. So each of those subsections mean something. So like 1110 means curriculum supervisor. And so each of them ties back to a state report so that at the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, they can compare what we're spending in one category versus another by using that account string.
Gotcha.
Just, as good budget practice, it's helpful to know a little bit about how funds are used and governed. So those are all links to, fee-based programs, scholarships. Most people don't realize that as a school district, we are the fiduciary agent for any scholarship that comes through here. So let's say Lance and his wife want to start a scholarship, the money still flows through us. So again, another checks and balance for us, another set of finance laws that we need to follow as well. There's a great resource out there called the Division of Local Services. These are all links here that talk about good accounting policies and procedures, guidelines. There's legal opinions, there's references. If you're ever, just up at night wondering, why do they do it like that? This is a good place to look. And if you are not bored to tears yet, the next slide has all of the manuals and special accounting reference documents. Woo! So
Maureen's smiling over there. She's
she
excited.
loves it. So these include everything from a town treasurer's manual that you'll see there all the way down to just a glossary of municipal finance terms. A good place to look if you have questions about what something means or how we do something. There's a manual here about capital planning. Again, something that we don't do a ton of at this committee, but I think as the vision in the town starts to shift, that'll come back to us a little bit. People are looking more than 1 or 2 years out and more like 3 or 5 years out, so that'll be helpful for us as we go through that. We talked a lot about what the purview of school committee is, and I think the canned response is the purview of school committee is budget and policy. I just want you to know that budget is a policy instrument. And so by setting your budget, you are setting priorities. You are talking about personnel policies, you are supporting student-related policies, you are, affirming our engagement with grants. So, if you're, during your budget cycle, you decide to expand a program or to cut a program, you're making a policy statement through your budget. And so it's important that you understand how they overlap. There's a link there in the bottom corner that takes you through the school finance handbook. That is a resource on the Massachusetts Association of School Committees website. So it does help you think a little bit more globally about what budget implications are for programs and for students and for staff. As we go through the budget cycle, there's a couple of good questions you should be asking. What assumptions are we making when we're budgeting? I usually front load what my assumptions are when we do this, but these are kind of good checks and balances as you go through a presentation to say, hey, do I understand this? When was the last time you looked at enrollment projections? How reliable are they? Are there new budget guidelines? What are your assumptions? Are there things that you're counting on as funding that might not come in? So if I came to you and said, okay, my FY23 budget is based off 100% circuit breaker reimbursement, you should automatically say, whoa, that you should be making a more conservative estimate because it's never been reimbursed.
We'll say
at
good
100%,
luck.
Right? So those type of things. And this is, just some helpful questions to kind of run through your mind as you're looking at some of the presentations that you'll see over the next couple of months. Personnel law is exciting. So I think it's a learning curve when you become a school committee member, how little you have to do with the personnel in the district. But you do have some say, right? So you're able to hire the superintendent, you're able to hire the business manager, you're able to hire the special ed administrator, you negotiate collective bargaining agreements. But other than that, you really don't have much say. And so I think sometimes folks will approach you on the street and say, I can't believe you hired that hockey coach. really has nothing to do with you all as a school committee member, but there are personnel laws that govern education, so there's links to those on these pages as well. There's a series of data that we look at as we start to go through our budget cycle. So, you know, you want to make sure that the information and data that we're using all lines up. So we use EPUMS, which is our Educational Personal Information Management System. SIMS is that same type of system, but for student data. We look at our end-of-year reports from previous years. We look at other districts' end-of-year reports, and we look at our enrollment. Enrollment has been a topic that comes back and forth for us over years when we see a bubble of students in any one grade. Several years ago, we did an internal enrollment projection. So here in Pembroke, which is a great thing, families move here with young kids. So the birth rate in Pembroke isn't necessarily high for students that are born in Pembroke, but the number of students that we see as incoming kindergartners far surpasses the birth rate here in Pembroke. So that's great. That's great that families are moving to town with school-age children. But it creates a challenge when you're trying to make a multi-year,
Anticipate numbers.
reliable enrollment projection. So before I joined the district, you all had gone out for a pretty expensive, lengthy enrollment projection that takes you out to 2025, and it has been off course since the second year. So we do try to look at it.
Money well spent, is that what you're saying?
We try to look at it and correct, look at birth rates, look at house sales, look at those type of indicators to see where we're going. I'm happy to report that the kindergarten here at North is the largest kindergarten we've had at North in 6 years. That's a great sign.
It's a great sign.
What else? When we're looking at how we're doing, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education identifies DART communities for us. So the list you have here are like communities, any individual school. So Pembroke High School has a separate set of DARTs. Elementary schools have a separate set of DARTs. Our middle school has a separate set of DARTs.
Okay.
But as a community, these are our DART
These are
communities.
I never would have thought half of these communities would be matching ours. That's
So
interesting.
when we say they're a DART, it means that they are similar in
Similar enrollment,
size
yep.
to us, similar in free and reduced lunch demographic, but that's really it. There's
Okay.
not the wealth factor, property value, that doesn't necessarily feed into DART.
But
It's really
district
driven
and-
off size.
Interesting.
These have been fairly stable. I know Freetown Lakeville has been a DART of ours for several years. Mansfield is newer for us,
I was gonna
and
say.
I think Wakefield, but.
Mansfield's surprising to me.
Actually, Groton, that's the one that surprises me.
Yeah, that's true.
It is. So,
But it's rural.
Yeah, it's up off 495.
right. When we look at our DART comparisons as a district, we're looking at enrollment, our percentage of low income, our percentage of students with disabilities, and our percentage of English language learners. That next slide, the orange bar is us. It shows you where your scores are in relation to those DART communities. That's obviously information that we use when we're thinking about how to allocate our funds. You know, what are other people doing that they're getting more success in a similar type of financial constraint that we have. I know, Susie, you did have a question about some of the 5 through 8 science data, as well as some of the elementary 3 through 8. We do, as Mary Beth has talked to you ad nauseum about, we have embarked on a new Open Science curriculum, which is an inquiry-based curriculum, so we do expect to see some gains in our science over the next couple of years. I will say, as far as grades 3 through 8, ELA and math, that we seem to be a little bit lower than the DART schools there. There are a couple of particular grades at particular schools that are outliers for us, that are unlike our regular data. So when Mary Beth talked about the achievement report, we talked a little bit about just some of the differences that we had seen in years past, and we did talk about those there. So.
Thank you.
My favorite thing to do is to look at how much we spend versus our DART communities per student. So on this tab, you see how much Pembroke spends per student, and just a clarification on the year. So the year that's reported is fiscal year 21. We file our fiscal year 22 end of year pupil and financial report on October 30th. It needs to be audited at the state level before it's used as the base. So that's why FY21 is the data
Still the
that's
old
used here.
numbers.
As I said during the vocational presentation, Pembroke spends $15,658.30 per student. Across the board, there are the different categories that we spend the funds in. They range from administration to professional development to capital maintenance, those type of things. It's interesting to see kind of where your dollars line up versus DART schools. You'll see with the DART schools that we were given, there's only 2 that spend less per pupil than we do. It's interesting to look at where they spend their funds. You know, we are really savvy when it comes to professional development to use grant funds in order to fund a lot of our professional development, which is why it's $29.24 per student, which
jumped
seems
out, yeah.
abnormally low, but we have a high level of professional development for our staff. We really use our Title IIA grants and any other opportunities out there to fund those opportunities for staff, so it doesn't come out of our operating budget, which allows us to spend more money on some of the other categories. You'll see we spend a lot on instructional leaders. That was, a district-wide decision to shift to the content supervisors K through 12, and we've had tremendous gains by just having those positions. So, again, it's a fun slide to look at. During the budget process, I always show you what we spend versus the towns that are around us that aren't necessarily our darts.
Our
but
dart
it's-
schools.
But it's fun to say, if we had $9 million, like this person's spending, look what we could do. So, again, just a data point that we use when we're thinking about our dollars. This next slide takes you through all of the different school budgeting methodologies: line item, zero-based, program-based, site-based, and student-based. We do a bit of a hybrid model here of line item and program-based budget. So there are some accounts in our budget that we just roll over year to year because they're pretty stable, whether it's copy paper or photocopy leases, telephone lines, that type of stuff. But we really, really look at a program-based budget. So we look at what are we trying to do to move the district forward in sense of programming, how do we prioritize that, where do those funds come from? The most efficient way, in my opinion, as a school business official, to budget is student-based budget, and that's really the thought process of the money's with the kid. And, how much money does it take to educate a special ed student in district versus a regular ed student, instead of lumping everybody together as one student. The most arduous way to budget is the zero-based budget, where you start every year at zero and build your budget. So we've done a sampling of all of these. For fun, I've asked administrators this year to create a budget using one of these methods and talk to me about why they were doing it, because it's interesting. Because we do historical
approaches
and
it differently.
program-based, it doesn't mean it's the only way to do it. I'm interested if people want to explore something else. And the fun that you've all come for, the timeline. So I would, not knowing what you all are going to select for January meeting dates, I'm anticipating that you might not want to meet on January 3rd, but I don't know.
Probably I would get a consensus, I'm guessing.
I'd lean
not.
away from that. 'cause
Yeah.
Probably, so I would say the 10th perhaps, yeah.
So I didn't know if you just wanted to do January 17th and
Or
then
the 17th and then slide our way in.
slide our way in. And so I picked January 17th for the maintenance of effort budget presentation. So that's really me presenting to you, if we were going to continue to do everything we're doing now, what that would look like for next year. And then traditionally, that has been followed by a series of individual budget presentations: teaching and learning, student services, elementary and secondary budgets, athletics, facilities, technology, visual arts. All of that feeds into our admin recommended budget that we generally bring to you the beginning of April, where we talk about what we as an administrative team have prioritized, get your feedback on that, see if there's something that you were hoping to see that you didn't see, go back to the drawing board. That generally feeds its way into my favorite conversation, the fee discussion, where we start to talk about, here's all the great things we want to do, how do we pay for it? Fees doesn't generally garner us a lot of money, but it does offset some of the costs, so we have that conversation towards the end of April. That meeting is just a little bit later because of school vacation week. We don't generally meet then. We really balance the budget. What are we going to cut to get what we want? Or by that point, we know what the number from the town is. We go through that, which feeds into our public budget hearing that, if it's a speedy budget cycle, you could be having the public budget hearing in April ahead of town meeting, but town meeting is slated for May 9th. So we need to be balanced by then.
If we had to pick a date for when we want our reps and senators, the 2 dates in February, is one preferred, or?
Oh, well, I'm going to be here both of them.
Depends on the topic base, right?
Right, there's only one presentation per each of those, so you could easily do an update from the legislators and do the presentation there, so whichever one works.
See what works in their schedule.
And if by chance they can't do the same, I've got to get 3 people in 2 dates, I've got a funny feeling getting them all on the same
A
date.
couple years
with
ago,
one
it
people.
actually didn't work. You guys weren't able to get them.
They couldn't get them, yeah.
Right. And then, it just didn't work.
All right, let me see what I can do.
Do the best you can.
Thank you.
So the next
6
meeting will
o'clock
be
at
the
North, right?
17th.
Consistent.
That's your next week.
After the next week.
Yeah. So again, this is meant to be a resource document. Everything in there is a link for you to just dive as deep or as not deep as you want into school finance. 5 years ago, we did a budget workshop because it was the first time we had had any new members on the committee in a while. So we spent a Saturday at the high school and went line by line, item by item for the budget. I don't know that you all need that right now, but if you feel differently, I'm happy to try to put something together. But I do think you all have had enough experience that, you know, we can find our way through this process.
And, right, I mean, Sue, if you feel like you need
I'm happy to meet with you one-on-one, Sue.
one-on-one time,
Yeah, we don't need to do that.
Yeah.
If I can ask, I'll call Aaron.
Which is fine. I don't mind. I'll spend as much time with you as you want. That budget workshop, I think it was helpful for folks. I think you and David were both there, yeah.
Yep, I went to it.
But
Well, maybe we may wait until we have a new school committee member before,
well,
Yeah,
if
maybe
Aaron,
we'll
if
want
Aaron's timeline stays on, right,
right.
it'll be right in that
Right in
early
that- right.
February meetings, right?
And then it can just be like two of us going for a little
extra help.
extra help.
You have to come
Extracurriculars
separately.
is always helpful,
Tighten
yes.
time.
Tighten time, yes. Sounds good. Thank you, Aaron.
Yep.
And thank you, team. With that, I know our meeting, we have a meeting next week, and then we are off for the holidays. We're
So
gonna,
next week will be
Technology.
the tech plan,
Yeah.
the first read of the program of studies, and we'll be joined by a representative from, two representatives remotely from Bob Rogers Travel to talk a little bit about some of the concerns associated with the Papa music trip to Disney. Gwen will also be here as the director of that program because there's some questions, I think, about some of the fundraising pieces, so they'll be able to answer the questions.
Can we request some information from them before the meeting to look at?
Like what?
Well, the fact that, just again, having scanning the game, I've made 2 payments. They didn't book hotel rooms, they didn't book flights, from what I'm understanding. What do they do with my money? You know, kind of thing. I
So
didn't
as
do-
a school committee member, that wouldn't necessarily be the level of question that we would be asking them, but I can ask for some sort of timeline for how, a trip timeline as far
Right.
as reservations, what that looks like. I'll see what I can get from them.
Okay, I'm just figuring
Yep.
just a little more information.
Yep.
As
See what
opposed to
I'll see
hearing
what I
everything.
can get.
Thank you, Aaron. Well, even the total budget for the trip, you know, what is it, and, you know, how is it
How's the money being
exponentially
spent?
jumped $500,
Yep.
you know, per kid? So,
See what they'll give me.
cool. All I can ask for.
All right, sounds good. So with the next meeting being set for next week, I will accept a motion to adjourn this meeting.
So moved.
We have a motion.
Second.
Motion and second. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
And no opposed. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.